the lawyer and the Fed.
Hi,
Hey,
John.
sir. How are you, sir?
doing?
Good.
I'm doing okay. All right, so I have to do a DWI investigation.
Okay.
Okay. Did you have anything to drink before you were driving?
Yeah, earlier I did.
Okay. How much did you have?
Like a drink
Okay. A drink of what?
of vodka.
Vodka.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Just do me a favor. Place your hands on the side. Okay. Lean forward. Okay. What I'd like you to do is follow the tip of my finger with your eyes, and I move your head. Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You're gonna step towards me. Okay. I just demonstrated the test. So
Okay.
place your left foot in the imaginary line. Place your right foot to toe.
Imaginary
Just like
line.
this. Yep.
Left foot.
Just like this. Okay. Stop.
Sir.
Okay. So go back. So left foot imaginary line. Place your right foot to toe. Arms by our side. Okay. Okay. Now stop. Okay. Arms by our side. Do you have any questions about the test?
No, sir.
Okay. You may start the test now.
Okay. Yeah, 9. Let me start over. I wasn't counting. I have ADD. I get punched in the head by living. Please, hold on. Can I start over? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Okay. So we're going to stand here.
And we're live. Lawyer and the Fed here. And this is a new platform. Hope everybody enjoys it. We're going to be talking a lot of things like MMA, sports, fitness, fucking man shit. I want to introduce you to the Fed.
Fed here, and let me just start by saying, like, I am so happy to be here. It's an honor.
It should be in honor of the highest decree.
Fuck out of here.
All right. Anyway, dick. So everybody obviously seen they came in hot off the Jon Jones clip. It's the body cam arrest video. For those who don't know, Jon Jones was arrested once again in New Mexico. This time for aggravated DUI and negligent use of a firearm. Okay.
A little debacle for all my Sopranos fans out there.
So basically, we seen John, poor Johnny, doing the field sobriety test, and unlike past occurrences with law enforcement, where he had that real cocky, brazen attitude when he was younger, he caught that first DUI. He was a lot more docile, a lot more respectful.
He was defeated. He was defeated before he even, like, you know how in fights sometimes fights are won before they even engage. That first stare down tells you everything. From the moment he engaged those police, he was done.
Yeah, I think. And we could elaborate more on that in a minute. We'll get there. But I think if he would have taken a different tact, unfortunately for him, I think he would have had a stronger case at actually walking that night. But the facts are, there was a gunshot heard before all of this that he was seen talking to some homeless people, supposedly, and the cops pulled him over. But key, what you said about, you used the word defeated. It's interesting, and we're going to get back to that, too, because I think he was almost at a point where it was like he's fucking given up.
Yeah, well, there is one point in the video where I believe he says something to the effect of, things were going so good. You know, I just want to be with my kids. I thought I heard something like that towards the end of the video. And it's very telling. It's very telling. He didn't have any swagger, any defiance left in him at this particular point, in my opinion.
No, you're right. And as a DOJ federal law enforcement officer, I think he was using the tact of just basically trying to kiss ass. And he thought maybe calling him yes, sir, no, sir. And he thought that, that real docile, submissive attitude was going to help him in some way, but it just didn't. Things only got worse and worse, as you see on the clip. He messes up the fucking steps. He doesn't even know what he's doing. He has to start over, and you can always count on Jon Jones getting in trouble, right?
That's taxes and Jon Jones being a fuck-up. That's it. The first thing that stood out to me, like as soon as I watched it, for one, we can't overlook or overstate the importance of the fact that he was shit-faced. Like, you could hear the fucking drunk in his voice. He just had no chance. He had no chance of talking his way out of this one. And the more he spoke, it was like quicksand. The more he just stunk. It was bad, man. It was kind of painful to watch, honestly, for me.
I don't want to get over lawyery or anything, but just for the record, and we have to say this, these charges are so far unsubstantiated beyond his actual arrest. These are allegations that are yet to be proven in a court of law, and as always, the presumption of innocence, as we're entitled to in the U.S. Constitution. Innocent until proven guilty. So again, these are alleged charges, and Jon Jones was allegedly intoxicated and was charged with the following: negligent use of a deadly weapon, part of the New Mexico Penal Code.
Right.
It's a misdemeanor. Had it been a felony, he could face serious jail time, but when it's a misdemeanor less, it's a year or under. Basically, even though it sounds really bad, negligent use of a deadly weapon, it's still a misdemeanor, classified New Mexico law. He was also charged with aggravated DWI in the state of New Mexico. So aggravated DWI, and that comes down to the blood alcohol concentration, how much alcohol is in their blood.
Which in this case, I believe it was 2 times the legal limit for Johnny Boy.
Exactly, 2 times the legal limit, and that's what applies. It's either basically you're really drunk, or you cause an injury to someone else, or you refuse to submit to the test. So being that he was completely hammered, I believe they said he, like you said, twice the legal limit, he got that aggravated DWI. He also got the negligent use of a deadly weapon. They're both considered misdemeanors in the state of New Mexico, and they both have maximum jail penalties under a year. Now,
Jesus, John, why don't we talk about that for a minute? What the fuck is wrong with Jon Jones? You know, like the whole thing, like you got to be a crazy motherfucker. The whole Joe Rogan's prepackaged quote, he's the baddest motherfucker in the world. You got to be crazy to, I don't know about that anymore. Like having had the advantage of gone to a high school like we did, where half of it was like working class, lower working class people, and the other half was privileged kids. This is like important to my opinion here, because one thing I observed in a lot of those wealthier, privileged kids, as soon as they went to college, they fucking ran amok. It's like the formula of growing up privileged, having mommy and daddy squash all your troubles, having no responsibility, combined with newfound freedom and a whole bunch of like-minded individuals, it never ends well. Like, these people, they go apeshit. And I don't know, I see a little bit of that in John. I do.
he has almost that privileged aura, and I don't want to go offending anybody, obviously. Like you said, we went to a high school that was there where there was privileged kids, there was working class, and then there was poor people like the lawyer in the Fedware, okay?
Right. Half of the junior high we went to was working class, lower middle class, whatever. And then once we got to high school, we shared it with the rich kids on the other side of town, literally. You get to observe like a social experiment of sorts as you watch people, growing up and getting out into the world.
For sure. It's almost, he has this aura about him that he was raised, I don't want to say in like a privileged white, upper class high school and neighborhood. He's from Endicott, New York. It's not the richest, it's not the worst. It's like, not too much different from where we're from. But
and don't forget that his father was either very religious or was a pastor. Like, Jon Jones wasn't even allowed to play, quote, secular music, I believe, growing up. It was his father had them under lock and key, if I'm remembering correctly. And then think about this, Jon Jones was a guy, he was a star athlete, he had 2 freak athlete older brothers, but he himself, he was a New York State champion wrestler in high school. He has aspirations on being a Division I champion and even further, perhaps. So he didn't have the grades to go Division I. He goes to a small junior college that's known for its wrestling in Iowa. And in his freshman year, he was an undefeated national champion. He goes from that, he got scholarship money to wrestle at Iowa State, one of the best programs in Division I at the time, under the legendary Cael Sanderson. and his girlfriend gets pregnant. And he was briefly on the roster at a D3 school in upstate New York. And then he's fighting, and how long did it take him to become arguably the baddest man on earth? It didn't take long. It's like he fucking went nuts. The money and the fame and the ability to just destroy these guys was, to me, that's what makes Jon Jones the nut job that he is now. It's not so much what Rogan's talking about, that there's like a screw loose or something like that.
100% agree with. And now I'm remembering, you're talking about when Joe Rogan was saying if you're going to be a great fighter, you almost have to have that outlaw, like, screw loose mentality, and there's got to be something crazy about you, fanatical, and you're going to be like, Rogan was talking about how you got to be a wild motherfucker, and you got to be crazy and all this shit. I don't buy that. I don't think Jon Jones is that guy. I think Jon Jones happened to receive a valuable education in wrestling. He grew up with both, as you said, both of his brothers were tremendous athletes in football, and
wrestling.
And he developed...
And wrestling.
And they were good wrestlers, too, but he developed...
They were state champion wrestlers, so I'm sorry to interrupt you, but yes, they were. At least one of his older brothers was a state champion wrestler as well. Jon Jones, and this is interesting, when he won the state title in New York, it was in folk style, or American Scholastic style wrestling. When he won the Junior College Nationals, it was in folk style, Scholastic style wrestling.
No doubt.
Also, he wins regional titles in Greco-Roman as well.
Basically, he was a long, rangy, freakish athlete who had a really strong wrestling base, and in the mid to late first decade of the 2000s, that was a really valuable skill set. He trained at the Bomb Squad. Yeah. He had some legit training partners. Not a world-class team. He would later leave for Jackson's MMA, Jackson Wink. But there was enough there with the natural gifts that he had and his wrestling ability to really make him a dangerous force. And they did. They got him all the way up to, I believe, the Brandon Vera fight was his last fight at the Bomb Squad. So, yeah, I believe John's last fight with the Bomb Squad was when he broke Brandon Vera's orbital bone with those nasty elbows, the ground and pound. And then he went on, to Jackson Wink. He becomes a world champion. He goes into the public lexicon of MMA superstars, and now debatably the greatest fighter to ever lace up a pair of gloves. And it, like you said, it was just all too much, too soon, and he wasn't that dude that actually really went through stuff, and I think that's what you're hinting towards too. I don't think he really found out who he truly was yet by the time he reached superstardom. I don't think he was a guy that went through trials and tribulations like some of us have early on in life.
Absolutely. And no upbringing is without some version of struggle, but it's all relative to whatever that person has been through, like, before. I mean, I think it might be worth noting that, like I said, it's like as soon as he got out from under his parents' thumb, he didn't know how to deal with that freedom, and he was a well-spoken, charismatic, somewhat good-looking young man, and he's getting national attention from all these wrestling colleges once, and then he finds himself in the UFC. Like, it couldn't have been more than 3 years after that. And, like, he is wowing people. Like, do you remember the first time you saw Jones toss some dude around the octagon effortlessly? The modern era, there was nothing like that.
Absolutely. I was there, live in Las Vegas, UFC 94, when BJ Penn attempted to be the first double champion. He was the lightweight champ fighting George St. Pierre in the main event. Jon Jones, little-known fighter, was on the undercard at, for all you gamblers out there, I believe he was plus 190 against the American Psycho, Stephan Bonnar. What Jon do?
Oh, that was the Bonnar fight?
Jon Jones went in there, put on a fucking clinic, basically ragdolled Stephan Bonnar, hitting him with wild spinning back fist kicks. But really, what was the highlight of the fight was he was just tossing him with his Greco, just ragdolling him, and he beat the fuck out of Bonnar.
He did. He certainly did. He was off and running at that point.
And then after
running
that,
through great fighter after great fighter.
And then
it was unprecedented.
Look, there's nothing else. I mean, there's nothing else we have to say about the guy's legacy. We touched on it. He's arguably the greatest fighter to ever lace up a pair of gloves. He ragdolled, smashed, submitted the best of the best of the best, from Machida to Rampage to Daniel Cormier, Alex Gustafsson. The list goes on and on. He's faced everybody. Glover Teixeira. Remember what he did
Brian
to
Bader.
Vladimir Mondashenko, the janitor back in the day. Matt Hamill, even though the DQ loss, he still was smashing his head in. And that's a real tough, hard-nosed wrestler himself, Matt the Hammer Hamill. Shout out to Matt Hamill.
Absolutely. And then Ryan Bader, Division I All-American.
Literally
Made it look easy.
took him down, took Ryan Bader down, D1 All-American, took him down with a double, submitted him in the first round. That led to his title shot, a la Shogun, destroy Shogun inside of 2 rounds. He becomes the youngest ever light heavyweight champion of the world in UFC history. And there's nothing more to be said about his greatness, but I do feel bad. And at first it was more like, oh my God, Jon is in trouble again, like for the how manyth time? But honestly, I really truly felt sorry for him when they clicked those bracelets, because it's rough, man. If you've been in that spot, I know what that feels like. It's a terrible feeling. I don't know what it feels like as an adult and a grown man, but nevertheless, I know the feeling, and it's not a good one.
I felt bad for him as well, like especially because what he had just done, getting his life back together and reascending to the top of the world. That's like something very few people do. And there was just something about his demeanor, man. Like, that was one of the first emotions that I felt. I felt sorry for the guy. I don't know why. I don't know if he's worthy of that kind of sympathy, but like, you remember when he got pulled over for the drag racing thing, he told that cop he was a fucking liar. He said, "You are a fucking liar." But this time there was none of that, man. I felt like he doesn't have it in him. Probably tired of the bullshit.
Well, I mean, I think it's a mix of two things. Like, just going back to what you said, that's a story as old as time itself. When people are they're so deep into something bad that, they're so far in a pit of despair that they're not even going to try to bullshit the world anymore. They're just done. And I think I totally agree. I think there's some of that there, and it's almost a moment of clarity for him, and he's done, and it's almost as if it's a cry for help, and he wants to stop being the type of dude he's been for the past half a decade and running or better. But then also I believe that being completely submissive and so polite and trying to garner sympathy, I think part of that might have been the con man in Jon just a little bit. I'm 50-50. Just like anything else, the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. And again, I feel terrible for the dude. But outside of this and this terrible incident, and God knows what's going to happen, as a lawyer, I am good for something once in a while. And I could say that both of these charges are misdemeanors, and he's innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. I can give a reasonable opinion on the outlook for Jon. Obviously, nothing's concrete. In my opinion, he's likely to plea out to lesser offenses than the ones described that he was charged with. There's the gun charge and the aggravated DWI. They're both misdemeanors. If he winds up pleading to them, doing some type of diversion, he's likely to avoid jail time. So let's just be...
Yeah, I think so.
Let's get out and say that. As a lawyer, I'm going to tell you, he's facing not 2 of the worst charges. Any crime is serious, but he's very likely going to plea out, have to do some community service, pay some big fines, may even find himself back on probation. He's not going to go to jail. I doubt the UFC is going to discipline him, because then they would be contradicting themselves. When Conor had gone and thrown that dolly at the truck, with the Brooklyn card, and he got arrested, the UFC let that play out legally, and they said whatever legal punishment he received was suitable enough. They kind of left that alone. I think they'll do the same here. They're also desperate for buys and events right now. They can't lose Jon. He's such a big star. So after this all works itself out in court in the next coming months, by the time the world is back to normal, Jon will be in that cage fighting again. That's for damn sure. But before we go, I kind of want to touch on...
I'd like to weigh in on that real quick, if I may.
As far as his actual fighting, we want to talk about, correct?
No, I want to weigh in on what's going to happen to him in the interim between now and the next time he steps in the cage. And one thing I think it's important to note, that the UFC does not give a fuck about being consistent. Dana White, just because he cut Conor a break, his cash cow, his golden goose, doesn't mean he's going to do it for Jon Jones this time again. I don't think... Well, we know that the UFC's business model has shifted away from, relying on these huge draws, because they have none. But Jon isn't pulling like he was, man, and he's not even fighting like he was. Look at his last 3 fights. They were all to pumped-up middleweights. He arguably lost two of them.
See, that's what I want. That's what I wanted to get into before we wrap up. Now, you got to remember, with this whole coronavirus pandemic going on, the UFC is going to be strapped for cash flow because they're not putting on events. Like you said, they're starving to build new stars. You could say they're moving away from the fighter-centric megastar model, but they're still going to need, let's be clear, they're going to have to create and maintain superstars on pay-per-view to be a viable business model going forward, at least the level of business they're doing. So John will be back in that cage, but that's good that you wanted to touch on that, because the Jon Jones we've seen in his past probably 3 fights, Jon Jones we've seen in the past 3 fights isn't the same Jon we've seen early in his career at all. It's not even the same Jon we've seen in the middle of his career, submitting Lyoto Machida, etc. I mean, I would argue, going back all the way to his return in the OSP fight, that he hasn't looked the same since then, outside of the Daniel Cormier victory when he was roided to the fucking gills.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, even though what it came down to was a few sparse metabolites, I forget what the substance was, we all know that was nonsense. There's a lot that goes into people passing drug tests, but USADA is not playing games.
And Jon's a cheater, let's be clear. Jon is a fucking confessed, caught, and prosecuted cheater in the world of combat sports when it comes to steroids. I'm just telling it like it is. He's a steroid cheater.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And you're right. That was the last time that he looked. That was the last time he looked like Jon fucking Jones. When he head kicked Daniel Cormier and got his belt back. Obviously, he popped shortly thereafter. But since then, he beat Gustafsson, who retired after that fight, or maybe he had one more fight after that. He retired because his back is in such bad shape. And look, obviously, I'm taking nothing away from Jones and his ability even now, but he's not what he used to be. He's not as entertaining, and he's not as formidable. Gustafsson. Then Anthony Smith, who was a middleweight, now
puffed up middleweights, like you said.
Yeah, Thiago Santos, dangerous, also a puffed up middleweight, and then Dominic Reyes, who was the good-sized, young, up-and-coming dude, who I actually think if he had a little bit more seasoning going into that fight, he would have known when to go in for the kill and probably would have finished Jon, in my opinion.
Well, that's where I'm going to have to respectfully disagree just on the last part with he probably would have finished him. Because I really, and it's good that you brought that up, because I really wanted to highlight, there is, however, something to be said for this man's ability to always dig down deep no matter what he is facing and come out on top.
No doubt.
This guy, no matter who it's been, no matter what version of Jon Jones you got, whether he was on the juice, whether he was off the juice, whether he was sniffing coke, getting arrested, or he's toting his Bible, Jon Jones is there to bring it every fucking time, and to grab that belt away from him, you're gonna have to fucking pry it out of his cold, dead hands. Because when it's crunch time, he turns the jets on. And when it's those championship rounds, those money rounds where fucking legends are made, he shines every time.
That is true. One thing I think that kind of lends itself to that is that his chin, is largely preserved. He hasn't taken much damage in his long career at this point.
No.
So even though his fighting age is getting up there, how many times has he been wobbled? I don't know if I could remember him ever being wobbled. I know that he's gotten stung a few times. I think Machida got him pretty good.
I was going to say Machida tagged him. Gustafsson tagged him. Cormier whopped him with a nice punch. Glover.
So he's taking his blows.
Yeah,
but he still got a chin, man.
Well, he's never been knocked out. He's never lost by TKO. He's never lost, period, outside of a disqualification in a fight where he smashed the dude's head in. That's a good segue into our final point. Where does he go from here? And like you said, he's never been knocked out, TKO'd. He hasn't taken the damage. He's gotten, he's taken his hits, but he not to the point where he's visibly showing any signs of CTE or brain damage from an accumulation of concussive blows.
Right.
The guy trains smart. He's at a world-class team. They basically build a whole camp around him. So he still has some fight time, some shelf time left in him.
Absolutely.
And
he has no sign of Chuck Liddell-itis, where he touches his chin and he goes to sleep. He has no No sign.
Not at all. And so, like I said, it brings us to where does Jon go from here? Now, as far as the legal shit, like we already touched on, he's probably going to get through it. He's going to have to deal with it. He's going to have to man up and come responsible. But really, his career is going to end one of two ways. By hook or by crook, he will be back fighting. That's a given. The guy will fight. Now, he's either going to get himself whole again, he's going to get the help that he needs, he's going to find whatever he's missing inside of himself, he's going to reconnect with nature and his higher power, and, you know, if everything had happy endings, Jon would go in there like the end of a fucking superhero movie and just bash the fucking next three guys lined up, whoever who defend his title, run through, you know, his competition, end his career without ever losing a real fight, and he'd be immortalized, greatest fighter of all time. Unfortunately, real life isn't quite as happy and theatrical, and the fight game, even more so, is pretty unforgiving. And if he doesn't come correct when it's time to come back, you're going to be looking at, say, a 34, 35-year-old Jon Jones post-suspension probably, or, post-legal issues. And like we said, he kind of squeaked by those last few guys who we thought shouldn't have had nothing for him. You know, a prime Jon Jones would have ate those guys up, chewed them up, and spit them the fuck out. He would have got them out of there. Yeah. Got him out of there inside of a couple rounds, okay? So
yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think obviously there's something to be said for the level. Like, you know, we're talking about newer guys that, you know, like, it's like the Chris Weidman, Anderson Silva paradigm, where Weidman had the benefit of coming up in a time where Anderson Silva was wrecking people. So that was always in the foreground. Like, that was the apex that he had to aspire to.
Agreed.
So guys are getting better, but Jon Jones is just one of the freakiest talents we'll ever see. Just his confident things, his improvisational, crazy spinning shit, his wrestling, everything.
Well,
you know,
and that's also a strong point to underline is the game hasn't passed Jon by. Jon is the future fighter. Jon is the prototype of what you want. Jon can strike and kickbox with anybody. He's unorthodox as hell. He's rangy. He's got the wingspan of a 7-footer, basically. He's got elbows. He's got knees. He's got that little cheap kick he does to the oblique. Yeah, he's got that little cheap oblique kick. He's got an amazing wrestling game, both freestyle and Greco. He's got great submission skills. For sure, the guy is the prototype fighter. He still is in a situation where I don't think the game's passed him by. He's still enough in his physical prime to go out with that storybook ending as the greatest of all time, but only time will tell. We don't know which. It's all a matter of which Jon are we going to get.
Right. Something happens too. I mean, I'm sure once I mention it, you'll realize you've seen it a million times. Something happens to these aging fighters where their skills are still intact, and even if their chin holds up, something happens to their output, their aggression, their killer instinct. Like, when was the last time you saw Jon Jones try to wrestle anybody? Or think about like a Uriah Faber. He's in phenomenal shape. His chin isn't completely shot. He just, like, they get gun shy. So in my opinion, that's how Jon Jones finally is taken down in the octagon. He'll get a little bit timid. You know, if he ends up taking a year or more away from the fight game due to this little, you know, snafu.
No doubt. And I should note, though, he did take down the Reyes kid a couple times. He wasn't able to control him for any meaningful amount of time. Honestly, it's
right about that.
It's debatable whether the takedown should have scored much because of the fact he didn't do anything on the ground. He wasn't passing, continuing to advance his position. He wasn't setting up submissions. He wasn't doing damaging ground and pound. But you're right. There's been that killer instinct almost absent from Jon Jones' repertoire as of late. And the cynical side of me probably attributes it to possibly a lack of steroids or performance-enhancing drugs, but I don't know. I could be wrong. Either way, you can't take shit away from the guy. He's arguably the greatest to ever do it. He'll be a legend in anybody's book, no matter how the rest of it unfolds. And honestly, I want to end by wishing Jon Jones the best. And for the first time, I truly, truly felt bad for him. And you know what? I'm rooting for him to not only get over his personal issues and demons, but to come back and to clean house when he comes back, defend his throne, and walk out into the sunset as the greatest. I'm rooting for him for the first time in a long time.
Absolutely. And I'll say straight up, I am a Jon Jones fan. like we kind of grew up with him, you know, in a weird way. Like we got to see his rise. I'll always have a soft spot for the guys from the you know, the 2010-ish, you know, like the first decade of the 2000s onward. I hope he comes back, man. I really do. He's a fucking legend, no doubt.
No doubt. So, with that said, we're wishing Jon Jones the best, and just hopefully he gets the help he needs. Hopefully, first and foremost, he finds whatever out there that he's seeking, and, you know, power to Jon Jones. We'll be back to speak on whatever happens. We're going to be checking in.
Until next time, guys.
Until next time, the lawyer and the Fed. Make sure to like, subscribe, tell your mom, tell your dad, tell your friends.
Stay tuned. Stay safe. A lot of interesting shit coming on the podcast and obviously in real life. So God bless us all.
The lawyer and the Fed got a lot coming for you in these crazy corona times. But we're signing out, guys. Catch you later.
Goodbye.